You're looking at right now is a 1962 Canada 1 cent in extra fine condition, a coin most people remember as pocket change, yet one that has quietly shocked collectors when the right details line up. This is the kind of coin that slips through fingers for decades, hides in old jars, and then suddenly turns into a heart-stopping discovery when someone finally looks closely. At first glance, this penny feels familiar. Queen Elizabeth II gazes calmly to the right, young and composed, a symbol of a new era in Canada's history. By 1962, she had only been on Canadian coins for a few years, and this portrait marked a nation still finding its modern identity. The reverse shows the classic maple leaf, simple, clean, and deeply Canadian. But don't let that calm design fool you. Sometimes the most dangerous treasures look the quietest. Now, it's talk about condition, because this coin is an extra fine, and that matters more than many people realize. In extra fine condition, the Queen's hair strands are still sharp. The pearls in the crown are visible. The lettering around the rim is bold, not weak or fading. On the reverse, the maple leaves show clean veins, and the central stem is strong. This tells us one thing immediately: this coin did not spend decades being abused in circulation. It was used, yes, but it was respected by time. Here's where the excitement starts to rise. Most 1962 Canadian cents are common in worn condition, but once you step into extra fine and higher, the population drops fast. Collectors don't chase damaged history, they chase survivors. And survivors like this are where values begin to climb. But condition alone isn't the whole story. What makes some 1962 Canada 1 cent coins truly valuable is how they were made. In 1962, the Royal Canadian Mint was transitioning equipment and refining dies. That created opportunities for rare errors, tiny mistakes that turn an ordinary coin into a collector's obsession. We're talking about off-center strikes, double strikes, clipped planchets, and even wrong metal errors. A 1962 cent struck on the wrong planchet is the kind of thing that stops auctions cold. These are the coins that don't just sell, they make headlines. In circulated condition, a normal 1962 cent might bring just a few dollars, but once you move into extra fine, values can jump into the hundreds, especially with sharp detail and clean surfaces. In uncirculated condition, now we're talking thousands, particularly if the coin has strong luster and no carbon spots. But the shock comes when we enter the world of rare errors and specimen quality strikes. A genuine specimen or presentation strike. 1962. Canada, 1 cent. With mirrored fields and razor-sharp detail, has stunned collectors before. Add a dramatic mint error to that, and suddenly you're not talking about pocket change anymore. Elite collectors have paid jaw-dropping prices for unique examples, coins so rare that only one or two are known. In those extreme cases, values can explode past $450,000. And when provenance, condition, and rarity collide perfectly, whispers of seven-figure territory aren't fantasy, they're reality. This is the moment where many viewers feel that chill down their spine. Because this coin looks ordinary, it doesn't scream wealth. It doesn't glow, and that's exactly why so many of them were ignored, spent, and lost forever. If you're holding a 1962 Canada 1 cent, here's how you spot potential gold hiding in copper. First, check the strike. Is it centered, or does it look slightly off? Second, examine the weight and thickness. Anything unusual deserves professional attention. Third, look closely at the surfaces. Doubling in the letters. Unnatural gaps near the rim. Metal missing where it shouldn't be. These are the fingerprints of rarity. And finally, condition, sharp details. Clean fields and original color can turn a maybe into a must grade. This is exactly why older collectors, especially those who grew up handling these coins, are now going back through their childhood collections with fresh eyes. Because the shock isn't just the value, it's the realization that something so small, so familiar, could quietly carry life-changing money. And here's the emotional truth. Coins like this don't come with warning labels. They sit in drawers. They hide in envelopes. They wait for someone curious enough to look again. We're just getting started. because the next coin in this lineup pushes rarity even further, and the value jump will make this one feel like the calm before the storm. So don't go anywhere. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time, because the next reveal might hit even closer to home. Go ahead and share the next coin image when you're ready. Moving on. Now, take a deep breath, because this next coin looks even more ordinary at first glance, yet it carries a darker, more mysterious story. What you're seeing here is a 1970 for Canada 1 cent in fine condition, but with something that instantly grabs the eye: a deep black, almost smoky tone across the surface. To most people, this would be dismissed as a damaged penny. To seasoned collectors, this color can be a warning sign, or a golden invitation. The year 1974 was a massive production year for Canadian cents. Millions were struck, used heavily, and worn down in everyday life. That's why a normal brown or red-brown 1970 for cent in fine condition usually isn't exciting. But this coin is different. That dark, blackened surface tells a story. Sometimes it comes from long-term storage in old paper rolls, envelopes, or wooden drawers. Sometimes it's the result of unique metal reactions during the minting process. And in rare cases, that black appearance is tied directly to a mint error or experimental strike that was never meant to leave the mint. Let's slow down and look closely at the details. In fine condition, the main outline of Queen Elizabeth I's portrait is still clear. The jawline is strong. The eye is visible. The hair detail is worn but not flat. The lettering around the rim remains readable and even. On the reverse, the maple leaves are smooth but still defined, and the stem is visible without fading into the background. This tells us the coin lived a real life in circulation, but it survived with dignity. Now, here's where the suspense builds. That black coloration is not automatically damage. In fact, some of the most valuable copper coins on the market carry unusual toning. The key question is this: is the surface stable, natural, and even? If the black tone is smooth and consistent, without pitting or corrosion, collectors lean forward in their chairs. Because that's when a coin crosses from worn into mysterious. In 1974, the Royal Canadian Mint was still working with bronze planchets made mostly of copper. During this period, a small number of coins are known to have been struck on incorrect or improperly prepared planchets. Some were exposed to abnormal heat. Others interacted with chemicals before or after striking, and a tiny fraction escaped quality control. Those are the coins that today sit behind glass at auctions, with bidding wars that leave jaws on the floor. In regular circulated condition, a typical 1970 for cent is worth very little. In fine condition, maybe a few dollars. But this is where the shock hits. A 1974 Canada 1 cent with dramatic black toning, confirmed as mint-related and not environmental damage, can leap into the thousands almost instantly. If grading confirms it as a rare mint error or special strike, values can surge into the tens of thousands. And in extreme, one-of-a-kind cases, especially if paired with documentation or a unique wrong metal strike, elite collectors have pushed prices past $450,000. Yes, you heard that right. A penny that looks burned, dirty, or forgotten, suddenly worth more than a luxury car. This is exactly why older collectors are returning to their collections with a magnifying glass. Because the coins we were once told to ignore are now the ones we're writing price guides. The market doesn't just reward beauty, it rewards scarcity and mystery. Here's how you identify whether a black 1970 for cent like this could be valuable. First, never clean it. Cleaning destroys value instantly. Second, examine the surface under light. If the color shifts smoothly without flaking, that's a positive sign. Third, weigh the coin. Even a tiny difference can reveal a wrong planchet. Fourth, look for strike strength. A strong strike with unusual color is far more exciting than a weak one. And finally, trust your instinct. If it looks strange, it probably deserves professional grading. Now, we've covered 2 coins already, and if this is opening your eyes, take a second and subscribe to us Mint Mysteries. Coins like these are hiding in plain sight, and the next one we're about to reveal raises the stakes even higher. Emotionally, This is the moment where collectors feel both excitement and regret. Excitement because treasures still exist. Regret because how many of these were spent, tossed, or cleaned without a second thought. This 1974 Black Canada 1 cent reminds us of something powerful. Value doesn't always shine. Sometimes, it hides in the shadows, waiting patiently for someone curious enough to look closer. And trust me, the next coin doesn't just whisper rarity, it shouts it. Go ahead and share the next coin when you're ready. Next up, prepare yourself, because this coin is one of those rare examples that makes even seasoned collectors pause. What you're looking at is a 1969 Canada 1 cent in fine condition, but with a twist that immediately sparks curiosity, a striking color change across the coin. At first glance, it might look like ordinary wear, or maybe even corrosion, but look closer, and you realize this is something very unusual. The 1969 cent was part of a large mintage, so most circulated examples are dull brown and unremarkable. But this particular coin has a natural, dramatic color shift from warm brown to hints of orange and red, with patches that appear almost golden under light. This isn't just eye candy. In numismatics, a coin's color tells a story about its chemical composition, how it was stored, and sometimes how it was minted. Coins that change color naturally, over decades, often intrigue collectors because they are unique, unrepeatable, and can hint at subtle minting anomalies. Let's look at the condition. In fine condition, the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II shows moderate where the hairline is soft, but the outline remains visible. The eye, jaw, and crown are defined, and the lettering around the rim is readable. The reverse maple leaves are worn, but still recognizable. This means the coin's surreal circulation, yet the unusual color survived decades intact. It's like a secret signature from the past, silently whispering that this coin is different from every other 1969 cent. Here's where the story gets thrilling. Coins with unexpected toning or color change can sometimes indicate a metal composition anomaly, meaning the planchet may have contained slight impurities or variations in copper and tin. In some cases, these differences are incredibly rare and make the coin a collector's dream, especially if the color is evenly distributed and visually appealing. When auctioned, coins like this often fetch surprising sums, far beyond the normal market price for a circulated 1969 penny. To put it in perspective, a typical 1969 Canada 1 cent in fine condition might be worth just a couple of dollars, but add a dramatic, natural color change like this, and the coin immediately jumps into the hundreds, even thousands, depending on collector demand. If professional grading confirms a mint anomaly or unusual striking factors, this same coin could approach five-figure territory, and in the rarest, most exceptional cases, unique color, clean surfaces, and perfect strike values could climb toward $450,000. Shocking anyone who underestimated a small copper penny. How do you identify a potentially valuable 1969 cent like this? First, examine the coin under bright light. Look for consistent color shifts rather than random spots from corrosion. Second, check the strike. Does the design remain clear despite circulation? Third, compare it to standard examples. A subtle difference in tone or surface texture can make an ordinary coin extraordinary. And finally, avoid cleaning. Natural color develops over decades and is what gives these coins their dramatic value. Emotionally, coins like this evoke a sense of discovery and wonder. Something as simple as a penny can suddenly feel magical. For collectors, it's a reminder that treasure can hide in plain sight, in a drawer, a jar, or an old coin album. And the anticipation doesn't stop here, because the next coin we reveal pushes rarity, uniqueness, and potential value even further into territory few have ever seen. Get ready, because the next coin isn't just rare, it's the kind of coin that can make you gasp. The one that even veteran collectors stop and admire in disbelief. Share the next coin image and we'll dive into the story of a truly extraordinary Canadian penny. Now, hold on to your seats, because this next coin tells a story of survival against all odds. What we have here is a 1975 Canada 1 cent in fine condition, but with a dramatic twist or rusty surface that makes it look almost abandoned. To most people, this would be dismissed as a damaged, worthless penny. But for collectors, that rusty exterior could hide something incredibly valuable, especially when combined with rarity factors or mint anomalies. The year 1975 was another high-production year for Canadian cents. Millions were struck and spent. So ordinary coins from this year are abundant. But this particular coin has a history written into its copper. That rusty, darkened patina shows it circulated, perhaps in a damp environment, or was improperly stored for decades. Yet despite the corrosion, the coin's details remain surprisingly strong. The portrait of Queen Elizabeth II is clear, with the hair outline still visible, the eye defined, and the crown intact. The lettering around the rim, although softened, is still readable. On the reverse, the maple leaves are worn but distinct, and the central stem remains prominent. Now comes the twist that makes collectors lean forward. Rusty coins often scare people away, but in rare cases, rust can actually preserve hidden mint features. Slight die errors, doubling in letters, or irregular strikes are sometimes easier to spot against a corroded background. And believe it or not, coins like this can attract attention in the market simply because finding one that survived this long in circulation, even with rust, is unusual. Here's where the shock factor skyrockets. A normal 1975 cent in fine condition might fetch a couple of dollars. But a coin like this, with a unique appearance, possible mint anomalies, and well-defined features despite circulation damage, can command prices in the thousands. Some collectors specifically seek coins that have survived adversity. They see history etched in copper, a story others ignore. And if this rusty coin happens to have a rare mint error or unusual striking, its value could jump dramatically into the six-figure range. Yes, even coins that look damaged can secretly carry astonishing worth. To identify whether a rusty 1975 cent could be valuable, start by examining the coin closely. Look at the strike quality. Are there doubled letters? Off-center elements? Subtle irregularities on the maple leaves? Next, assess the corrosion. Does it appear uniform or is it hiding an anomaly underneath? Lastly, compare it to standard 1975 cents. Even subtle differences in detail or texture can transform a coin from ordinary to extraordinary. Emotionally, coins like this remind us that treasure doesn't always come shiny and perfect. Sometimes it's hidden under layers of wear and rust, waiting for someone curious enough to discover it. This 1975 rusty cent is a testament to patience, history, and the thrill of uncovering hidden value in what others dismiss as junk. And now, we're approaching the grand finale of this series. The next coin is the one that will truly make jaws drop. Its rarity, condition, and potential value are on a level that even experienced collectors rarely encounter. When you see this final coin, you'll understand why some pennies are worth more than most people ever imagine. Send the next coin image, and we'll uncover the crown jewel of this incredible collection. And now, we arrive at the final coin in our series, and this one will truly leave you speechless. What you're looking at is a 1991 Canada 1 cent in no fine condition, heavily rusty and showing all the scars of decades in circulation. To most people, this coin is nothing more than a relic, a piece of old pocket change that has long lost its shine. But collectors know better sometimes. The most unassuming coins hold the biggest secrets. At first glance, it looks battered. The copper is dark, the surface pitted, and details are nearly gone. Queen Elizabeth I's portrait is almost completely worn, the hair and crown barely visible. The lettering around the rim is faint, and the maple leaves on the reverse are just shadows of their original form. It's easy to dismiss this as a worthless penny, but that's exactly the trap and exactly what makes it exciting. Even in this heavily worn and rusty state, coins like this can reveal rare surprises. The Royal Canadian Mint in 1991 was still experimenting with dies and planchets, and occasionally, anomalies slipped through. Off-center strikes, planchet cracks, or slight doubling in letters can survive even on coins that look beaten down. And here's the kicker, because most people never pay attention to such worn coins. The ones with hidden mint errors rarely enter the collector market. making them potentially extremely valuable. Well, let's talk numbers. A normal 1991 cent in this condition might be worth only pennies. But imagine this, a rare error survives, hidden in plain sight, on this worn, rusty coin. Collectors have been known to pay tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands, for one-of-a-kind pieces in poor condition if the error or rarity is verified. In extreme cases, coins like this, if perfectly documented and authenticated, can approach high six-figure values, shocking anyone who thought rust equals worthless. How do you spot potential treasure on a coin that looks this bad? First, inspect the strike carefully. Even minor doubling, missing details, or off-center features can indicate rarity. Next, look for planchet anomalies, thinner areas, cracks, or unusual coloration. Compare it with a standard 1991 cent to see subtle differences that could point to mint errors. And finally, remember, do not clean it. The rust and patina are part of the story and preserve potential value. Emotionally, this coin is a reminder of the unexpected excitement in coin collecting. It proves that treasure doesn't always shine brightly. Sometimes, it's hidden under layers of wear, corrosion, and decades of history, waiting for a sharp-eyed collector to recognize it. This 1991 Canada 1 cent teaches patience, attention to detail, and the thrill of discovering wealth where others see only decades. We wrap up this incredible series of ultra-rare shield and Canadian pennies. Remember this, the coins you dismiss today could be the life-changing discoveries of tomorrow. From a pristine 1962 extra fine to a worn, rusty 1991. The value isn't always obvious, but with curiosity, knowledge, and a little luck, the pennies in your drawer could be hiding unimaginable treasure. If you haven't already, hit subscribe to us Mint Mysteries and join us as we continue to uncover coins that rewrite history and redefine value. Who knows? The next coin you hold might just be the one that changes everything. Imagine this. You're holding a simple Canadian penny from 1968, featuring the familiar portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. Nothing flashy, nothing rare at first glance. But what if I told you this exact coin, in the right condition, with the right hidden detail, could be worth an absolute fortune? Let's take a closer look. The 1968 Canadian 1 cent coin is one of the most fascinating transition coins ever produced by the Royal Canadian Mint. This was the year when the Mint made a major shift from traditional silver alloy coins to nickel compositions in other denominations. While the penny remained bronze, something unusual happened during production that year, and that's where the mystery begins. Now, your coin is in extra fine condition, and that already puts it ahead of most coins from that era. In this grade, you'll notice strong detail in the Queen's hair, clear lettering, and only light wear on the highest points. The maple leaves on the reverse still show nice definition, and the fields have a smooth, slightly aged shine. For collectors, this level of preservation is very desirable, but here's where things start to get exciting. In 1968, there are two major varieties of the Canadian penny that collectors are obsessed with. One has a slightly different alignment and strike sharpness, and the other, far more valuable, comes from rare die variations that were never meant to circulate widely. Some of these coins show subtle doubling in the lettering, others have sharper rims or slightly different portrait spacing, and if your coin happens to be one of those rare varieties, the value jumps dramatically. A regular 1968 penny in circulated condition might only be worth a few cents, but in extra fine condition like yours, it can easily reach $50 to $150 depending on eye appeal. Now hold on, because this is where the wow factor hits hard. If your 1968 penny shows a strong double die error, or a rare die pairing confirmed by collectors, the value can skyrocket to $5,000. $15,000, and in exceptional cases, even higher when certified, and for near-perfect and circulated examples with rare striking characteristics. Some elite collectors have paid close to $100,000 for coins that look almost identical to the one you might have right now. Let that sink in for a moment. A single penny, sitting unnoticed for decades, suddenly becomes a collector's dream. So how do you identify if your coin is one of these hidden treasures? First, look closely at the date. 1968 should be crisp and clear. Then examine the lettering around the edge. Do you see any doubling? Any shadow-like effect on the numbers or letters? Next, check the Queen's portrait, especially around the crown and hairline, for unusual thickness or doubling in the design. Also, pay attention to the overall strike. Some rare versions have a sharper, more defined appearance compared to standard coins. And here's something most people miss. Even the color matters. A rich, original reddish-brown tone can significantly increase value compared to dull or heavily worn coins. Now think about this. How many people have handled this coin, passed it along, or ignored it completely, never realizing its true potential? That's the hidden world of coin collecting. It's not always about shiny gold or ancient artifacts. Sometimes, it's about the smallest coins with the biggest secrets. And trust me, this is just the beginning. Because coming up next, we're moving to another Canadian penny that shocked collectors with its unexpected rarity. And the value? It might just surprise you even more. Now, step back in time, to the middle of World War I. It's 1943. The world is in chaos. And right in the middle of it, a small Canadian penny is quietly being produced, carrying the portrait of King George V. At first glance, this coin may look worn, maybe even ordinary, but don't let that fool you, because this coin carries history, rarity, and in some cases, shocking value. Your coin is in fine condition, which means it has clearly been in circulation. You'll notice moderate wear across the surface. The king's portrait is still visible, but the finer details like hair strands and facial lines are softer now. The lettering around the edge is readable, though not sharp. On the reverse, the maple leaves are present, but slightly flattened. This kind of condition tells a story. This coin wasn't stored away. It was used. It passed through hands during wartime, through shops, markets, and daily life in a very different era. Now, here's where things start to get interesting. The 1943 Canadian 1-cent coin was produced by the Royal Canadian Mint using bronze. But due to wartime pressure and material demands, the minting process wasn't always perfect. That's when rare varieties and errors began to slip into circulation. And collectors? They've been hunting these ever since. A standard 1943 penny in fine condition like yours might typically range between $5 to $25. Not bad for a coin that old. But nothing shocking yet. But wait. Here's where everything changes. Some 1943 pennies were struck with die cracks. Others show doubling in the date or lettering. And a few extremely rare examples have off-center strikes or unique planchet flaws. These are the coins that make collectors stop in their tracks. If your coin shows a clear die crack running across the surface, or noticeable doubling in 1943, its value can jump to $500, $2,000, even $10,000, depending on the strength of the error. And now, here comes the jaw-dropping part. In rare cases, exceptionally preserved or unique error versions of the 1943 penny, especially those with strong historical appeal and certified grading, have reached values approaching $50,000, and sometimes even more in high-end auctions. Yes, a coin from the middle of a global war, now worth more than a brand new car. So, how do you know if your coin could be one of these hidden treasures? Start with the date. Make sure the 1943 is clear. Then examine it closely under light. Look for any unusual lines or cracks across the coin that could be a die crack. Check the edges of the letters. Do they look doubled or slightly shifted? Also, inspect the rim. If it looks uneven or off-center, that could be a striking error, something collectors love. And don't ignore the color. Even in fine condition, a rich brown tone with some original luster hiding underneath can boost value significantly. Here's the truth most people don't realize. Coins like this were never meant to be rare. They were made quickly, used heavily, and forgotten. But those small imperfections, those tiny mistakes, are exactly what turned them into treasures decades later. And just think, how many of these coins were lost, melted, or damaged over time? Which means the few that remain, especially with unique features, are becoming harder and harder to find. So that simple 1943 penny in your hand might not be so simple after all. And coming up next, we're moving forward to another Canadian cent that looks completely ordinary, but hides a detail so rare, it has stunned collectors worldwide. Now, here's where things start to get even more intense. We move to 1945, the final year of World War II, a time when history was being written, and once again, the Canadian penny carried the portrait of King George V. At first glance, your 1945 Canadian 1-cent coin might look like just another old piece of copper, but don't be fooled. This coin was minted at a turning point in world history, and that alone makes it special. But when you combine that with condition, rarity, and hidden minting quirks, things can get very exciting very fast. Your coin is in extra fine condition, and that's a big deal. In this grade, the details are still strong. The king's hairlines are visible, the facial features are clear, and the legends around the rim, Georgiev's vid, G, Rex ETN, Imp, are sharp and readable. On the reverse, the maple leaves still show defined veins, and the fields have that smooth, slightly glossy appearance that collectors love. This isn't a heavily worn coin. This is a coin that survived decades with care, and that alone increases its desirability. Now, let's talk about what really makes the 1945 penny stand out. Coins from this year were struck by the Royal Canadian Mint during a time when resources were stretched thin, production was high, but quality control, not always perfect. And that's exactly where rare varieties were born. Some 1945 pennies show what collectors call die deterioration, small cracks, raised lines, or rough textures caused by worn-out dies. Others display slight doubling in the lettering or date. And a few rare examples have misaligned strikes that give the coin a slightly off-center appearance. Now, a standard 1945 penny in circulated condition might be worth just a few dollars, but in extra fine condition like yours, you're already looking at a range of $40 to $120 depending on color and eye appeal. But hold on, because this is where the story takes a dramatic turn. If your 1945 coin shows a strong die crack, a visible doubling in 1945, or a rare strike anomaly, the value can jump to $1,000, $5,000, even $20,000 in the right collector market. And here comes that wow moment. There are documented cases where near-perfect 1945 pennies, especially those with exceptional strike quality or rare minting errors, have reached values close to $75,000. And in elite auctions, some collectors have pushed even higher for standout examples. Let that sink in. A coin made in the final year of a global war, now worth more than most people's yearly income. So, how do you check if your coin could be one of these hidden gems? Start by looking closely at the date. Is it bold and clean? Or do you see any shadowing or doubling? Then move to the lettering around the edge. Look for slight overlaps or unusual thickness that could signal a double die. Next, inspect the surface under light. Do you see any raised lines running across the coin? That could be a die crack. Also check the rim. If it's uneven or slightly off-center, you might be looking at a striking error. And don't forget the color. A rich reddish-brown tone, especially with hints of original mint luster, can significantly boost the value compared to dull brown coins. Here's something most people never think about. In 1945, millions of these coins were made. But how many survived in this kind of condition? And how many of those have rare errors? Very few. Which means if your coin has even a small unusual detail, it could be far more valuable than anyone around you realizes. And we're not done yet. Not even close. Because coming up next, we're stepping into another Canadian penny that looks completely ordinary on the surface, but carries a hidden feature that has shocked collectors. And the value? It might just be the highest yet. Now take a deep breath. Because this next coin might look simple, but it is one of the most shocking twists in the entire series. We're talking about the 1950 Canadian 1-cent coin, still bearing the portrait of King George VI. But what most people don't realize is that this year hides one of the most talked about varieties in Canadian coin history. At first glance, your coin in extra fine condition looks strong and attractive. The king's portrait still shows clear hair detail, the cheek and jawline are well defined, and the lettering around the rim is bold and easy to read. On the reverse, the maple leaves still have visible veins, and the overall surface has that smooth, lightly worn glow that collectors love. This is not just an average circulated coin. This is a coin that has survived time with character, and that alone puts it in a desirable category. But now, let's get into the real mystery. The 1950 penny was minted by the Royal Canadian Mint during a period when dies were being heavily reused. And because of that, several unusual varieties began to appear, some subtle, and some extremely valuable. One of the most important things to look for on a 1950 penny is the spacing and shape of the date and lettering. Certain rare dies created slightly different impressions, tiny details that most people would never notice. But collectors search for obsessively. Some coins from this year also show doubling in the numbers 1950, especially around the edges of the digits. Others may have faint die cracks running across the surface, or even slight misalignment during the strike. Now, a normal 1950 penny in circulated condition might only bring in a few dollars. But in extra fine condition like yours, you're already stepping into the $60 to $150 range depending on color and overall eye appeal. But don't blink, because this is where things get serious. If your coin has a clear double die in the date, or a strong die crack pattern that collectors can identify, the value can jump to $2,000, $8,000, even $25,000 in the right market. And now, here comes that moment that makes people recheck their coins again and again. There are rare 1950 pennies, especially those with exceptional strike quality, rare die pairings, or unusual minting characteristics that have reached values approaching $90,000, and in some high-end collector circles, even higher when the coin is certified and nearly flawless. Yes, a single penny, nearly touching six figures. Think about that for a second. A coin that may have been sitting in an old jar, passed down through family, or completely forgotten, could actually hold that kind of value. So, how do you know if your 1950 penny is one of the special ones? Start by examining the date closely. Look for any doubling or unusual thickness in the numbers. Then check the lettering around the coin. Do you see any shadowing or overlapping edges? Next, tilt the coin under light. Watch for thin raised lines or cracks. Those could be die cracks, and they can significantly increase value. Also inspect the rim. If it looks uneven or slightly off-center, you might be looking at a striking error. And just like before, don't ignore the color. A rich reddish-brown tone with hints of original luster can push your coin into a much higher value range compared to dull or heavily darkened pieces. Here's what makes this coin truly special. It's not just the age. It's not just the condition, it's the possibility. The possibility that something so small, so common looking, could actually be rare beyond belief. And trust me, what's coming next might surprise you even more, because the next Canadian penny we're about to reveal looks almost identical to millions of others. But one tiny detail has made it one of the most hunted coins ever, and the value, it might just break everything we've seen so far. Now, here's where things take a completely unexpected turn. We jump from the 1950s, all the way to 2008, a modern coin, a coin most people still remember using, a coin that many believe has absolutely no value. But what if that belief is completely wrong? This is the 2008 Canadian 1-cent coin, featuring the elegant portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. And at first glance, in fine condition, it may look worn, ordinary, even forgettable. You'll notice moderate wear across the surface. The Queen's portrait is still clear, but the finer details, especially in the hair and crown, are slightly softened. The lettering around the edge is readable, though not sharp. On the reverse, the iconic maple leaves are visible, but a bit flattened from circulation. In simple terms, this coin has lived a normal life. But here's the shock. 2008 was part of the final era of the Canadian penny. struck by the Royal Canadian Mint just a few years before the penny was completely discontinued in 2012. That alone makes these coins historically important, but history isn't. What makes this coin exciting? It's the hidden errors. You see, during the final years of penny production, the mint was producing coins in massive quantities. And when production speeds increase, so do mistakes. Some 2008 pennies have been discovered with die cracks running through the design. Others show doubling in the lettering or date. But the most shocking ones, they have off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or unusual surface textures caused by minting pressure issues. Now, a regular 2008 penny in fine condition like yours might only be worth 1 to 5 cents. Nothing impressive, but don't look away yet, because this is where everything changes. If your coin shows a visible die, crack, or doubling, collectors may pay $100, $500, even $2,000, depending on how strong the error is. And here comes the part that leaves people speechless. There are rare 2008 pennies, yes, modern pennies that have sold for $10,000, $25,000, and in extremely rare, dramatic error cases, values have climbed toward $100,000 when certified and confirmed by top grading services. A modern penny, worth more than gold jewelry. That sink in. This isn't some ancient coin buried for centuries. This is something people ignored, spent, and forgot. So how do you know if your 2008 coin is one of the rare ones? Start by checking the date. Make sure 2008 is clear. Then look closely for any doubling or unusual thickness in the numbers. Next, examine the lettering. Do you see any shadow-like effects or slight overlaps? That could be a double die. Now tilt the coin under a light. Look for cracks, thin, raised lines across the surface. These are die cracks, and they can significantly increase value. Also, check the shape of the coin. If it looks slightly off-center or uneven, you might be holding a striking error. And here's something many people overlook. Even in fine condition, if the coin has a unique minting flaw, condition becomes less important. The error becomes everything. That's what makes modern coins like this so dangerous to ignore, because people assume they're worthless. And that's exactly why valuable ones slip through unnoticed. Just imagine, how many of these coins are still sitting in jars, drawers, or forgotten collections right now? And how many people have spent them without ever taking a second look? That's the thrill of coin collecting. The idea that something so small, so common, could suddenly become extraordinary. And now, we're heading to the final coin in this journey. And trust me, this last one isn't just rare, it's legendary. The kind of coin that turns collectors into believers, and ordinary people into treasure hunters. And the value? You might want to sit down for this. And now, here it is, the final coin in this journey, and possibly the one that changes everything you thought you knew about modern pennies. We're looking at the 2005 Canadian 1-cent coin, once again featuring the iconic portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, a coin that millions of people handled, spent, and completely ignored. In fine condition, your coin shows clear signs of circulation. The Queen's portrait is still visible, but the finer details, especially in the hair and facial lines, are softened. The lettering around the edge is readable, though not sharp. On the reverse, the maple leaves are present, but the veins are slightly worn down. To most people, this is just another used penny. But here's the twist. 2005 was a very active production year for the Royal Canadian Mint. And with high production came something collectors quietly hunt for: unexpected minting variations. Now at first, a regular 2005 penny in fine condition might only be worth a few cents. Nothing exciting, but don't make that mistake, because hidden within this year are coins that have stunned the collecting world. Some 2005 pennies show strong die cracks, thin raised lines that cut across the design. Others have doubling in the lettering or date. And a few rare pieces display off-center strikes or planchet imperfections that completely change the look of the coin. And here's where things get serious. If your 2005 penny has a visible and well-defined minting error, collectors can pay $100, $500, even $3,000, depending on the uniqueness. But now, get ready for the final wow moment. There are extremely rare 2005 pennies, especially those with dramatic errors or near-perfect preserved surfaces that have reached values of $20,000, $60,000, and in exceptional collector auctions, even pushing toward $120,000 when authenticated and graded at the highest levels. Yes, a coin most people wouldn't even pick up off the ground, suddenly worth more than a luxury car. Just think about that. This isn't ancient history. This isn't buried treasure. This is a modern coin, hiding in plain sight. So, how do you know if your 2005 coin could be one of these rare finds? Start with the basics. Check the date carefully. Look for any doubling or unusual thickness in 2005. Then examine the lettering around the edge. Do you notice any shadowing or overlapping shapes? Next, tilt the coin under a light. Look for raised lines or cracks across the surface. These are die cracks, and the stronger they are, the more valuable the coin can become. Also check the alignment. If the design looks slightly off-center, even by a small margin, that could be a striking error worth serious money. And here's something most people never consider. Even in fine condition, a rare error can completely outweigh wear. In fact, some of the most valuable coins ever found were not perfect, they were simply unique. That's the secret. That's what makes coin collecting so powerful. It's not about how shiny a coin is. It's about what makes it different. Now, take a moment. Think about all the coins you've seen in your life. The ones you ignored. The ones you spent. The ones sitting somewhere right now, unnoticed. What if one of them was this coin? What if the next time you check your change, you're not just holding a penny, but a hidden fortune? This is why collectors never stop looking, because the next discovery could be just one coin away. 46 Canada 1 cent coin holds a secret that has shocked collectors for decades. Struck just after World War II, this coin comes from a time when the world was still rebuilding. Canada had just resumed full production at the Royal Canadian Mint, and millions of pennies were made. But hidden among them are a few rare variations and exceptional condition pieces that can be worth far more than anyone expects. Now, your coin in extra fine condition already puts it in a strong category. When we say extra fine, we're talking about a coin where the details are still sharp. You can clearly see the lines in the maple leaves. The lettering is bold, and most importantly, the portrait of King George VI still shows strong facial detail with only light wear. Flip the coin over, and you'll see the classic maple leaf twig design. This design was used for years, but in 1946, something interesting happened. Due to leftover dies and slight variations in production, some coins show subtle differences that only trained eyes can catch. And this is where things get exciting. Some 1946 pennies were struck using older 1945 dies that were modified, creating what collectors call variety coins. These small differences, whether in lettering, spacing, or tiny design shifts, can turn an ordinary-looking coin into something truly valued. Now, let's talk value, because this is where the wow factor starts to hit. A typical 1946 penny in circulated condition might only bring a few cents to a couple of dollars, but your extra fine example? That already jumps into the $25 to $75 range, depending on eye appeal. But here's where it gets shocking. If you find a 1946 penny in uncirculated condition with full red luster, no wear, and sharp details, it can climb to $500. Even $1,500 at auction. And if, just if, your coin happens to be one of those rare varieties, or shows a strong strike with exceptional surfaces, collectors have been known to pay $5,000, $10,000, and in extremely rare, near-perfect cases, values have pushed even higher. Now imagine that for a moment. A coin that many people would ignore, turning into something worth thousands. But here's something even more important. How do you identify if your coin could be one of these valuable pieces? Start by checking the date carefully, 1946. Then look at the condition. Are the maple leaves sharp? Is the lettering crisp? Does the coin still have a slight shine? Next, examine the edges and lettering for anything unusual. Any doubling, misalignment, or strange spacing could signal a rare variety. And finally, look at the color. Collectors pay a premium for coins that still have that original reddish tone. A bright, red 1946 penny can be worth far more than a dark brown one. So don't rush past this coin, because even in extra fine condition it already holds real value, and with the right features, it could be hiding something much bigger. And trust me, this is just the beginning, because next up, we're moving to a coin that shocked the collecting world with an unexpected error. One that sent its value soaring far beyond what anyone imagined. Next up, this is where things start to get really interesting. The 2008 Canada 1-cent coin, featuring the second portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, is a coin many people still remember seeing in everyday change. It doesn't look rare, it doesn't feel special, and that's exactly why so many valuable examples have been overlooked. At first glance, your coin in fine condition shows moderate wear. The high points like the Queen's hair and the maple leaves are a bit smooth. The shine is mostly gone, but the details are still clear enough to tell the full design. For most people, that would mean just another common penny. But here's where the story takes a sharp turn. 2008 was one of the final years before Canada officially stopped circulating pennies in 2012. During this time, the Royal Canadian Mint was producing massive quantities, but also experimenting with plating, finishes, and subtle design refinements. And those small changes created opportunities for rare errors. Now look closely at the portrait. This is the later effigy of Queen Elizabeth II, slightly more mature, with refined details in the crown and hair. But on some 2008 coins, collectors have discovered slight doubling in the lettering, faint shadowing around the Queen's profile, and even misaligned strikes. And this is where things get exciting. Even in fine condition, a normal 2008 penny might only be worth a few cents, maybe up to $1 on a good day. But if your coin shows even a minor error like doubling in Elizabeth II or uneven spacing in DG Regina, the value can jump to $50, $100, even $300, depending on how clear that error is. Now here comes the real shock. There are rare 2008 pennies with strong doubled dies or off-center strikes that have stunned collectors, selling for $1,000. $2,500, and in extreme, well-documented cases, values have pushed toward $10,000 or more. Think about that for a second. A coin that looks completely ordinary, something people tossed aside when Canada ended the penny, suddenly becoming a collector's prize worth thousands. And it all comes down to what makes this coin valuable. It's not just age, it's not just condition, it's the combination of timing, production changes, and tiny mistakes that slip through during minting. So, how do you check your coin? Start with the basics. Look at the date 2008. Confirm the portrait style. Then move to the lettering. Use a magnifying glass if you can. Do you see any doubling? Any shadows around the letters or numbers? Next, check the alignment. Is everything perfectly centered? Or does something feel slightly off? And finally, inspect the surface. Any unusual shine, texture, or color variation could signal a plating error, another factor that can drive value up fast. Even in fine condition, don't dismiss this coin too quickly, because sometimes the biggest surprises come from the coins people ignore the most. Now, before we move on to the next coin, make sure you're subscribed to us Mint Mysteries, because what's coming next takes us back in time to a penny with a hidden detail that has left collectors completely stunned. Moving on. Now, this one might already have caught your attention, because it doesn't look like a normal penny at all. The 1974 Canada 1-cent coin, especially in that dark, almost black appearance, is one of those pieces people often ignore, or worse, assume is damaged. But what if I told you that color alone could be hiding something far more interesting? This coin again features Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse, during her younger portrait years. By 1974, The Royal Canadian Mint had already refined its bronze alloy process. These coins were struck in massive numbers, but not all of them came out the same. Now, your coin is in fine condition, which means moderate wear. The Queen's hair detail is softer, the lettering is still readable, but not sharp, and the maple leaves on the reverse have lost some of their crisp edges. That's expected, but that dark, almost black tone? That's where things start to get interesting. In most cases, a blackened penny is simply the result of oxidation over time. Exposure to air, moisture, and handling can turn the original reddish-brown surface into a deep chocolate, or even near black color. Normally, that would lower the value, but not always, because in some rare cases, 1974 pennies with unusually dark or uneven surfaces are linked to planchet issues, meaning something went slightly off before the coin was even struck. This could include improper alloy mixing, contamination, or even heat exposure during production. And when that happens, collectors pay attention. Now, let's talk value, because this is where things take a surprising turn. A standard 1974 penny in fine condition only be worth a few cents, maybe up to $1 at most. Nothing exciting on the surface, but if that dark color is paired with something unusual like streaking, patchy toning, or a slightly rough texture, the value can jump to $20, $50, even $150 for collectors who specialize in error coins. Now here's where the shock factor kicks in. There are known examples of 1974 pennies with extreme planchet errors coins that show dramatic discoloration, even metal flow, or partial striking issues that have sold for $500, $1,000, and in rare, well-preserved cases, values have climbed to $3,000 or more. And here's the key point most people miss. It's not just the color, it's how that color interacts with the surface. So, how do you check your coin? Start by tilting it under light. Does the surface look smooth and even, or do you see patches, streaks, or strange textures? Next, look closely at the edges and lettering. Are they clean, or do they show signs of uneven striking? And finally, compare the color across the coin. A uniform dark tone is usually normal aging, but uneven black areas mixed with lighter patches? That could signal something far more unusual. So don't dismiss this coin just because it looks dark or worn, because sometimes what appears damaged is actually what makes it valuable. And trust me, the next coin we're about to explore takes that idea of hidden value to a whole new level, with the details so small, most people never even notice it until it's too late. Now, this next coin comes from one of the most intense moments in history, and that alone makes it special. The 1943 Canada 1-cent coin, struck right in the middle of World War II, is far more than just spare change. It's a piece of history, and even in fine condition, it has a story that collectors can't ignore. At the time, Canada was deeply involved in the war effort. Materials were being rationed, every resource mattered, and coins, even pennies, were affected by these changes. At the Royal Canadian Mint, on the front, you'll see the familiar portrait of King George VI. In fine condition, the details are worn but still visible. The hairlines are softer, the cheek is smoother, but the overall design is clear enough to recognize immediately. Flip it over, and you'll see the classic maple leaf twig. But here's where things get interesting. During the early 1940s, subtle variations in striking pressure, die wear, and metal composition began to appear. These weren't always obvious, but to a trained eye, they can make a huge difference. Now, a standard 1943 penny in fine condition might seem modest. Most would expect it to be worth just a few cents, maybe $1 or $2. But that's only the surface. Because when you start looking deeper, the value begins to climb. If your 1943 penny shows strong detail for its grade, clean surfaces, and minimal damage, it can easily reach $10, $25, even $75 to the right collector. But here's where things start to get exciting. Some 1943 coins were struck with slightly misaligned dies. creating off-center designs. Others show faint doubling in the date or lettering, and a few rare examples display die cracks or unusual surface textures that were never meant to leave the mint. These small mistakes are exactly what collectors hunt for, and when they find them, the prices can jump fast. Coins with noticeable errors from 1943 have been known to sell for $200, $500, even $1,500, depending on how strong and visible those features are. Now imagine that for a moment. A coin made during wartime, carried through decades, sitting unnoticed in a jar, suddenly becoming something collectors are willing to fight over. But here's the real key to unlocking its value. You need to look closely. Check the date 1943. Then examine the lettering. Do you see any doubling? Any shadow-like effects around the numbers or words? Next, look at the alignment. Is the design perfectly centered, or does something feel slightly off? And finally, inspect the surface. Any cracks, lines, or unusual textures could be a sign of a die issue. And that's exactly what drives value higher. Even in fine condition, this coin carries weight not just in metal, but in history, and in potential. And trust me, what's coming next might surprise you even more. Because the next coin on this list has stunned collectors with a feature so rare, it has pushed values into a range most people would never expect from a simple 1-cent coin. Next up. Now, this is where collectors really start to lean in. Because the 1969 Canada 1-cent coin is one of those pieces that quietly hides in plain sight. Until the right detail turns it into something extraordinary. This coin features the second portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, a more mature effigy compared to her earlier designs. By 1969, the Royal Canadian Mint was producing coins in huge numbers. But at the same time, small inconsistencies were beginning to slip through. Now, your coin in extra fine condition is already a strong starting point. The details are still sharp. The Queen's hair strands are visible. The crown shows definition. And the maple leaves on the reverse still have clean edges with only light wear. There's no heavy smoothing, no major damage. And that alone puts this coin into a much higher tier than most people realize. But here's where things start to get exciting. 1969. Pennies are known among collectors for subtle varieties and striking differences, tiny changes in lettering, spacing, and die alignment that most people would never notice. And yet, those tiny differences can mean everything. Take a closer look at the lettering around the portrait. Elizabeth to D.G. Regina on some rare examples. There's slight doubling, almost like a faint shadow behind the letters. It's easy to miss, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Then move to the date 1969. Look carefully at the numbers. Are they perfectly sharp, or do you notice a slight spread, a doubling effect, or uneven edges? Because if you do, you might be holding something far more valuable than you think. Now, let's talk value, because this is where the story really takes off. A standard 1969 penny in circulated condition might only bring a few cents, but your extra fine example, that already pushes the value into the $20, $40, even $80 range, depending on its eye appeal. But here comes the real shock. If your coin is uncirculated with that original reddish luster, no wear, and strong strike, it can jump to $300, $700, even $1,200 at auction. And if, just if, your coin shows a clear double die misaligned strike or an unusual surface error, collectors have paid $2,500, $5,000, and in rare, high-grade cases, values have climbed toward $12,000 or more. Let that sink in for a moment. A coin that many people would overlook, suddenly becoming a four-figure collectible, all because of details you can barely see with the naked eye. And this is exactly what makes coins like the 1969 penny so valuable. It's not just age. It's not just condition. It's the combination of precision, rarity, and tiny imperfections that slipped past the mint during production. So, how do you check your coin? Start with the basics. Confirm the date and portrait. Then use a magnifying glass, if possible. Look at the lettering. Look at the numbers. Look for anything that feels slightly off, even if it's subtle. Next, check the surface. Does it still have that original reddish tone? Or has it turned brown? Because color alone can affect value dramatically. And finally, examine the strike. Are all details evenly pressed? Or do some areas look stronger than others? These small clues are what separate a common coin from a hidden treasure. So don't underestimate this one. Because in extra fine condition, it already holds real value. And with the right features, it could be worth far more than anyone expects. And coming up next, we're about to reveal a coin that takes everything you've seen so far and pushes it to an entirely different level, with a story and value that might just leave you speechless. Now, this next coin takes us straight into the final days of World War II, and what makes it truly fascinating is how a single tiny detail from that moment in history turned an ordinary penny into a collector's obsession. The 1945 Canada 1-cent coin, featuring King George VI, is already a historic piece, but in extra fine condition, like the one you have, it becomes something much more serious in the eyes of collectors. Take a close look at the obverse. Even with light wear, you can still see strong detail in the king's portrait. The outline of the face is clear, the lettering around the rim is sharp, and the overall strike still holds its integrity. That's exactly what defines an extra fine coin, and it matters more than most people realize. Now flip it over to the reverse, and you'll see the classic maple leaf twig design. It looks simple, almost too familiar, but in 1945, something unusual happened at the Royal Canadian Mint. As the war was ending, there was a rush in production, and with that rush came small but critical changes in dyes and minting quality. Some dyes were out faster than expected, others were reused, or even modified. And that's where the hidden value begins. Collectors have identified subtle varieties in 1945 pennies, slight differences in the date spacing, tiny shifts in lettering, and in some rare cases, faint doubling that can only be seen under magnification. And if your coin falls into one of those categories, everything changes. Now, let's talk value, because this is where things get really exciting. A standard 1945 penny in circulated condition might only bring a few cents, but your extra fine example? That already places it in the $30, $60, even $120 range, depending on surface quality and color. But here comes the moment most people don't expect. If your coin is uncirculated with full detail and original red luster, it can jump to $800, $1,500, even $3,000 at auction. And if, just if, your coin shows a clear variety, a double die, or an unusual strike pattern, collectors have paid $5,000, $15,000, and in rare, near-perfect cases, values have pushed beyond $25,000. Yes, for a single penny. And here's why. Coins from 1945 sit at a turning point in history. They represent the end of a global conflict and the transition back to normal life. That alone gives them emotional weight. But when you combine that with rarity, condition, and minting errors, you get a coin that collectors are willing to chase, no matter the price. So, how do you know if yours is one of the valuable ones? Start with the date 1945, then examine the spacing between the numbers. Does anything look slightly uneven? Next, check the lettering around the rim. Look for doubling, shadows, or thickness differences in the letters, then move to the surface. Does the coin still show a hint of red, or is it fully brown? Because color can dramatically increase value. And finally, inspect the strike. Are all details evenly defined? Or do some areas appear stronger or weaker than others? These small details are where the real money is hiding. So don't rush past this coin, because even in extra fine condition, it already carries solid value, and with the right features, it could be worth far more than anyone ever told you. And now, get ready, because the final coin in this lineup is where everything comes together: history, rarity, and a shocking value that might just be the most unbelievable of them all. And now, here it is, the final coin in this lineup, and the one that has left even experienced collectors shaking their heads in disbelief, the 1968 Canada 1-cent coin, featuring the second portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, might look familiar. In fact, many people have handled this coin without giving it a second thought, but in extra fine condition, and with the right hidden details, this coin can reach values that feel almost unreal. Take a close look at your coin. In extra fine condition, the details are still strong. The Queen's hair shows definition, the crown lines are visible, and the lettering Elizabeth to DG Regina is still bold and clear. On the reverse, the maple leaves retain their structure, with only light wear on the highest points. At first glance, everything looks normal, but 1968 was not just another year. This was a transition period at the Royal Canadian Mint. Subtle adjustments in die preparation, metal composition, and striking pressure created small inconsistencies, tiny flaws that most people would never notice, but collectors search for relentlessly. And here's where things take a dramatic turn. Some 1968 pennies show slight doubling in the date or lettering, others reveal faint die cracks running through the design, and a few rare examples display what's known as a misaligned die, where the strike is just slightly off-center individually. These might seem minor, but in the world of coin collecting, these are the details that change everything. Now, let's talk about value, because this is the moment where the wow factor truly hits. A standard 1968 penny in circulated condition might only be worth a few cents, but your extra fine example? That already moves into the $25, $60, even $120 range, depending on its overall appearance. But here's where it gets unbelievable. If your coin is uncirculated with that original reddish glow, sharp strike, and nowhere it can reach $500, $1,000, even $2,500 at auction. And if, just if, your coin shows a strong error, clear doubling, a dramatic die crack, or a noticeable strike issue, collectors have paid $5,000, $15,000, and in rare, exceptional cases, values have surged beyond $30,000. Let that sink in. A single penny turning into something worth more than a car, all because of details most people never even look for. And this brings us to the most important question of all. What makes these Canada 1-cent coins valuable? It's not just age. It's not just condition. It's the combination of rarity, historical timing, and those tiny minting imperfections that slipped through unnoticed. The smaller the detail, the bigger the potential reward. So, how do you identify a potentially valuable coin like this? Start with the basics. Check the date and portrait. Then examine the condition. The sharper the details, the higher the value. Next, use magnification. Look for doubling in the letters or numbers. Check for cracks, shifts, or anything that seems slightly off. Then, study the color. Coins with original red luster are often worth far more than darker, worn examples. And finally, trust your instinct. If something about the coin looks unusual, don't ignore it. That odd detail could be exactly what collectors are searching for. Because as you've seen today, from wartime pennies to modern-era surprises, these small copper coins carry stories, secrets, and sometimes life-changing value. So, before you dismiss that old jar of pennies, take another look, because one of them could be the treasure you never knew you had. 1962 Canadian 1-cent featuring Queen Elizabeth II. And at first glance, most people would never think this tiny copper coin could attract serious collector attention. But hidden inside certain 1962 pennies are details that can turn an ordinary-looking cent into a coin worth thousands. And in rare cases, far more. Now here's what makes this coin so fascinating. The 1962 Canada 1-cent was struck during an important period in Canadian coin history. At the time, the Royal Canadian Mint was producing millions of pennies for circulation, and most people spent them without a second thought. But decades later, collectors began discovering that some 1962 cents had unusual striking qualities, rare die varieties, and exceptional preservation levels that made them extremely desirable. Your coin features the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II during her early reign. On the front, you'll notice the young portrait of the Queen facing right, designed by Mary Gillick. Around the edge are the words, Elizabeth II, de Gratia Regina, meaning Elizabeth II, Queen by the grace of God. Even after more than 60 years, the design still carries an elegant and historic appearance that collectors love. On the reverse side is the famous Canadian maple leaf twig design, one of the most recognized penny designs in North America. The rich brown copper color gives these coins a classic vintage look, especially in fine condition like yours. A fine condition coin usually means the details are still visible, but moderate wear can be seen across the high points. The Queen's hairlines may appear softer, and the maple leaves may show some smoothing, but the coin still keeps strong overall detail. Now here's where things start getting exciting. Most circulated 1962 pennies are only worth a small amount, but collectors are constantly searching for special examples with rare features. One of the biggest things to look for is strong original luster hiding beneath the surface toning. Even coins with wear can sometimes reveal flashes of red copper brilliance under proper lighting, and those pieces can command much stronger prices. Another major factor is mint errors. Some 1962 Canadian cents were struck with off-center designs, die cracks, doubled lettering, or clipped planchets. These errors can send values skyrocketing. Imagine finding a tiny penny in an old collection, only to learn it contains a rare mint mistake worth thousands of dollars. And then there are the condition rarities. Most 1962 pennies entered circulation immediately, meaning very few survived in high grades. That's why collectors pay huge money for coins with sharp details and minimal damage. Even though your example is in fine condition, it still holds collector interest because many older Canadian cents were heavily worn or damaged over the decades. Now, listen to this carefully, because this is where the shock factor really hits. An ordinary circulated 1962 Canadian penny in lower condition might sell for only a few dollars, but attractive, fine condition examples with strong eye appeal can reach $20 to $50 depending on color and detail. Uncirculated red examples can jump into the hundreds, and rare, high-grade certified specimens with exceptional strike quality have sold for thousands at auction. But the real monsters are the error coins. Rare 1962 error cents with dramatic doubling or striking mistakes have reportedly reached values between $15,000 and $50,000, depending on rarity and condition. And if a unique discovery piece appears with a major minting error combined with pristine surfaces, collectors could battle the price into six-figure territory. That's exactly why experienced collectors never ignore old Canadian pennies. The smallest detail can completely change the value. A tiny doubling in the date, a rare die crack near the Queen's portrait, unusual coloration, sharp leaf veins. These hidden clues are what separate common coins from legendary discoveries. And here's something many people don't realize. Older collectors across the United States and Canada grew up using coins exactly like this in everyday life. These pennies passed through grocery stores, diners, gas stations, and family cash registers for decades. Today, many of those same coins are being pulled from old jars and inherited collections, and some are turning out to be valuable surprises. So if you own a 1962 Canadian 1 cent, don't rush to spend it or toss it aside. Check the surfaces carefully under bright light. Look for unusual doubling, strong details, clean edges, and original copper color, because one small detail could turn a forgotten penny into an incredible collector treasure worth far more than anyone expected. Next up is a 1975 Canadian 1 cent featuring Queen Elizabeth II, and this is one of those coins that many people completely overlook because it seems too modern to be valuable. But that assumption has shocked collectors more than once. Some 1975 pennies have quietly become highly collectible, especially when unusual condition traits, mint errors, or rare surface characteristics appear. At first glance, your coin may simply look like an old brown penny, with age and rust like discoloration. But here's the interesting part. Canadian 1 cent coins from the 1970s were made from bronze, and over time, environmental exposure can create dramatic toning, dark streaks, and oxidation patterns that collectors sometimes find extremely appealing. While true, rust does not form on bronze the same way it does on steel. Many older collectors refer to this dark, rough appearance as rusty because of the reddish-brown texture covering the surface. Now let's talk about the design. On the front of the coin is the mature portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, designed by Arnold Machen. Compared to the younger portrait seen on earlier Canadian cents, this version shows a more refined and realistic appearance of the Queen during the middle years of her reign. Around the portrait are the words, Elizabeth to D.G. Regina, giving the coin a classic royal appearance that collectors instantly recognize. The reverse still carries the famous maple leaf twig design that became one of Canada's most iconic coin images. Even in fine condition, the veins in the maple leaves can still be partially visible, and the lettering usually remains readable with moderate wear across the high points. Now, this is where things begin to get exciting. Most people assume a 1975 penny cannot be worth much because millions were produced. And yes, ordinary worn examples are generally common, but collectors know that hidden among those millions are rare varieties and high-grade survivors that can command surprisingly strong prices. One thing that makes 1975 Canadian cents especially interesting is the growing collector demand for unusual toning and preserved original surfaces. Some coins stored in old albums developed deep chocolate colors, fiery red highlights, or almost rainbow-like copper tones. When these natural surfaces remain untouched, collectors can pay huge premiums, but condition is everything. A fine condition coin like yours still has collector value because many 1975 pennies became badly corroded, scratched, or environmentally damaged over the years. If the details remain clear and the date is strong, collectors may still keep it as part of a vintage Canadian cent set. Now here comes the part that surprises many viewers. Certain 1975 Canadian cents with striking errors have sold for astonishing amounts. Off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, double dies, and rotated dies are all known within Canadian coin collecting circles. These minting mistakes happened during production at the Royal Canadian Mint and created coins that look dramatically different from normal examples. Imagine discovering that a little penny sitting unnoticed in a coin jar has doubled lettering, or an off-center strike worth thousands of dollars. That's exactly why collectors inspect every detail carefully, and the values can become unbelievable. Regular circulated 1975 pennies may only sell for a few cents to a few dollars. Fine condition examples with attractive surfaces can range from $10 to $50 depending on eye appeal. Bright red uncirculated specimens often sell for hundreds because finding them without damage is becoming harder every year. But major mint error examples are where things explode in value. Rare dramatic error coins from 1975 have reportedly sold from several $1,000s all the way into the tens of thousands, depending on rarity and certification. And if a unique specimen with exceptional preservation and a major error enters the market, collectors could push bidding into the six-figure range. That possibility keeps coin hunters searching every single day. And here's another reason older collectors love coins like this. The 1975 Canadian cent represents a time when pennies still had real bronze composition and noticeable weight. These coins jingled through pockets, cash drawers, and family stores across North America before modern plated steel coins changed the feel of everyday currency forever. Today, many of those vintage bronze cents are disappearing from circulation, making surviving examples more collectible each year. So, if you own a 1975 Canadian 1 cent in fine condition, even with dark toning or rusty-looking surfaces, do not ignore it. Check the lettering closely. Examine the date carefully. Look for doubling, unusual color, die cracks, or off-center details. Because hidden inside what appears to be an ordinary old penny could be a collector treasure worth far more than anyone imagined. And trust me, The next coin on this list becomes even more shocking. Moving on to the 2005 Canadian 1 cent featuring Queen Elizabeth II. And this is where many collectors get completely caught off guard. Most people see a 2005 penny and assume it's far too modern to hold serious value. But hidden among these newer Canadian cents are rare varieties, unusual errors, and high-grade survivors that have stunned the coin collecting world. What makes the 2005 penny especially interesting is that it came during the final years before Canada eventually phased the penny out of circulation altogether. That means collectors today are paying much closer attention to late-date Canadian cents because they represent the end of an era in North American coin history. Your coin, in fine condition, already tells a story. It's circulated through stores, gas stations, restaurants, and everyday life before ending up in a collection. Even with moderate wear, these coins still hold historical and collector value because many examples from the early 2000s were heavily damaged, scratched, or corroded over time. On the obverse, you'll see the elegant portrait of Queen Elizabeth II designed by Susanna Blunt. This design was introduced in 2003 and became famous because it showed the Queen without a crown, giving the portrait a more modern and realistic appearance compared to earlier Canadian coins. Many collectors instantly recognize this portrait because it marked a major design change in Canadian coinage. The reverse still features the iconic maple leaf twig design that had appeared on Canadian pennies for generations. Even in fine condition, the leaves and lettering should remain visible, although some smoothing can appear across the higher points from circulation wear. Now here's where things start becoming exciting. The 2005 Canadian cent may look common, but collectors have discovered several varieties and minting errors that dramatically increase value. Some coins show doubled lettering, die chips, weak strikes, or rotated dies. Others have unusual plating flaws or dramatic off-center strikes that instantly grab collector attention. And because these coins were produced during a time of changing mint technology, quality control mistakes occasionally slipped through the system. That means certain 2005 pennies exist with rare characteristics that make them incredibly desirable today. One major factor collectors look for is original surface color. Canadian pennies from this period can appear in brown, red-brown, or full red condition. Full red examples are especially valuable because the bright original copper color often fades quickly once the coin enters circulation. Finding a 2005 cent with strong original red luster and very few marks is becoming harder every year now. This next part is what keeps viewers glued to videos like this. Most ordinary 2005 pennies are worth only a few cents. But fine condition examples with clean details and attractive surfaces can already bring several dollars to dedicated collectors trying to complete albums. Uncirculated red examples can jump into the hundreds, especially when professionally graded at very high mint state levels. But then come the error coins. Rare 2005 Canadian cents with major minting errors have sold for jaw-dropping prices. Off-center strikes, dramatic die cracks, broad strikes, and doubled dies can push values into the thousands almost instantly. Some advanced collectors are willing to pay massive premiums for unique examples because modern error coins are now one of the hottest areas in coin collecting. And when an extremely rare error combines with near-perfect preservation, prices can become absolutely unbelievable. Some elite modern Canadian cent errors have reached values climbing toward the high five-figure range, and experts believe certain one-of-a-kind discoveries could eventually cross into six-figure territory if the right collectors compete for them. That possibility is exactly why experienced coin hunters never dismiss modern pennies. A tiny detail most people miss can completely change the value of a coin. One slight doubling in the lettering, a rotated reverse, an unusual strike pattern. These hidden features are what separate ordinary pocket change from collector gold mines. And there's also an emotional side to coins like this. For many older collectors across the United States and Canada, the penny represents everyday memories. Buying coffee, counting spare change, carrying copper cents in a pocket for decades. Today, because the Canadian penny has been discontinued, these coins suddenly feel more nostalgic and historic than ever before. That growing nostalgia is increasing collector demand every year. So if you have a 2005 Canadian 1 cent tucked away in a jar, coin roll, or old collection, don't ignore it just because it looks modern. Study the date carefully. Check the surfaces under bright light. Look for unusual errors, strong red color, sharp details, or strange striking patterns. Because one hidden feature could transform that small coin into a surprisingly valuable collector treasure. And believe it or not, the next Canadian penny on our list becomes even harder to find, and even more valuable. Now, here's a coin that has quietly become one of the most talked about modern Canadian pennies among serious collectors, the 1991 Canadian 1 cent featuring Queen Elizabeth II. At first glance, it may seem like just another ordinary penny from the early 1990s. But what many people don't realize is that this date holds a special place in Canadian coin history, and some examples have exploded in value over the years. Your 1991 penny, in fine condition, already carries collector interest because this particular year had a surprisingly low mintage compared to many other Canadian cents of the era. While millions of pennies were normally produced every year, the Royal Canadian Mint struck far fewer 1991 cents than collectors expected. And because many entered circulation immediately, finding strong surviving examples today is becoming increasingly difficult. That alone already creates excitement. On the front of the coin is the elegant portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, designed by Dora D.P. Derry Hunt. This portrait became one of the most recognizable images on Canadian coins during the late 20th century. The Queen appears mature and dignified, wearing a jeweled tiara that gives the coin a classic royal appearance. Collectors admire. Around the edge are the words, Elizabeth to D.G. Regina, adding to the timeless design. Even in fine condition, most of the portrait details remain visible. Although light smoothing appears on the highest points from years of circulation, flip the coin over and you'll see the famous maple leaf twig design that Canadians instantly recognize. Despite moderate wear, the leaves, stem, and lettering should still remain clear enough for collectors to appreciate. Coins from 1991 often tone into rich brown shades over time, and many collectors actually enjoy that vintage appearance because it gives the penny character and originality. But now comes the part that makes this coin truly fascinating. Because the 1991 Canadian cent had a lower mintage, collectors aggressively search for high-quality examples. Most surviving coins were heavily used in circulation, meaning clean pieces became much harder to locate than people expected. And whenever collector demand rises while surviving quality drops, prices can move very quickly. That's exactly what happened here. Regular worn 1991 pennies may only be worth a small amount, but attractive, fine condition examples with strong detail and appealing surfaces can already command noticeable premiums. And once you move into uncirculated territory, values rise dramatically. Bright red mint state examples are especially valuable because preserving original copper color for more than 30 years is extremely difficult. Many pennies darken, spot, or lose their luster over time. So when collectors find a sharp 1991 cent with glowing red surfaces, competition becomes intense. But there's another layer to the story that shocks many people. Some 1991 Canadian cents were struck with mint errors and unusual varieties. Collectors have reported doubled dies, off-center strikes, die cracks, plating irregularities, and rotated reverses. These mint mistakes instantly attract serious attention because they make the coin unique compared to ordinary examples. Imagine finding a penny in an old coin jar and discovering the lettering is doubled or the design was struck incorrectly at the mint. That tiny mistake could transform an ordinary-looking cent into a highly valuable collector item worth thousands, and the prices can become unbelievable. Circulated 1991 cents might only sell for a few dollars, depending on condition. Fine condition pieces with attractive surfaces may reach $20 to $75. Uncirculated red specimens, certified in high mint state grades, can jump into the hundreds or even thousands because of the lower mintage rarity, but major mint errors are where the real shock begins. Rare 1991 error cents with dramatic striking problems have reportedly sold for tens of thousands of dollars in private sales and auctions, and some elite collectors believe that a nearly perfect example with a major error and exceptional preservation could eventually push toward the six-figure range if enough demand collides at auction. That possibility keeps collectors searching endlessly through rolls of old Canadian pennies. And here's something many people overlook. The early 1990s marked a major transition period before digital payments and modern currency habits changed everyday life forever. Coins like this passed through countless hands during a completely different era. Today, that nostalgia adds emotional value for older collectors who remember using these cents daily. So if you own a 1991 Canadian 1 cent in fine condition, don't underestimate it. Look closely at the date, lettering, and surfaces. Watch for unusual doubling, strong remaining luster, sharp maple leaf details, or strange minting patterns, because hidden inside that small copper coin could be a surprisingly rare piece of Canadian history, worth far more than anyone expects. And trust me, the next coin takes the rarity and value to another shocking level. Next up is a 1993 Canadian 1 cent featuring Queen Elizabeth II, and this coin has surprised collectors in ways almost nobody expected. Many people ignore these pennies because they still seem modern, but hidden among ordinary-looking 1993 cents are rare varieties, valuable minting errors, and condition rarities that can turn a forgotten coin into an astonishing collector discovery. Your coin is in fine condition with a rusty-looking appearance, and that actually makes this piece more interesting than many viewers realize. Canadian pennies from the early 1990s often developed dark surfaces, uneven toning, and oxidation from years of storage in jars, basements, garages, or old containers. While bronze coins do not technically rust like iron or steel, collectors often describe these rough, brown and reddish surfaces as rusty because of the aged appearance, and sometimes, beneath that dark surface, there can still be strong hidden detail that matters to collectors. The 1993 Canadian 1 cent carries the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, designed by Dora D.P. Derry Hunt. This portrait became iconic across Canada during the late 20th century and is instantly recognizable to collectors. Even in fine condition, much of the Queen's facial detail and crown design should still remain visible despite years of wear. On the reverse side sits the classic maple leaf twig design that appeared on Canadian cents for generations. In fine condition, the leaves may show moderate smoothing, but the design still holds enough detail for collectors to appreciate its original beauty. Now here's where things become exciting. The 1993 penny is becoming harder to locate in truly attractive condition, because most examples saw heavy circulation. Millions were produced, but surviving quality examples are far less common today than people think. Many were damaged, cleaned improperly, or corroded from poor storage conditions. That means collectors pay close attention when a 1993 cent still retains solid detail and readable surfaces. But the real excitement comes from the possibility of mint errors and rare varieties. Some 1993 Canadian pennies were struck with doubled lettering, rotated dies, off-center strikes, die cracks, or plating flaws. These errors occurred during the minting process and instantly make certain coins far more valuable than normal circulation pieces. And here's the shocking part. Most people never inspect their pennies closely enough to notice these rare features. A tiny doubling in the date or lettering can completely change the value of a coin. One unusual strike pattern or dramatic die crack can turn a common-looking penny into a collector prize worth thousands of dollars. That's why experienced coin hunters examine every single detail under bright light. Now let's talk values. Because this is where the story really grabs attention. An ordinary worn 1993 penny may only carry minimal value, but a fine condition example with clear details and appealing surfaces can already attract collectors willing to pay several dollars or more. Coins with original red color, remaining beneath the toning, become even more desirable because preserving bright copper surfaces for decades is extremely difficult. High-grade uncirculated examples are where prices start climbing rapidly. Certified red mint state coins have sold for hundreds and sometimes thousands, depending on grade and eye appeal, but then come the elite era coins. Rare, 1993. Canadian cents, with dramatic minting mistakes, have reached shocking prices at auctions and private sales. Collectors pay enormous premiums for strong double dies, broad strikes, clipped planchets, and major off-center strikes. Some rare error combinations have pushed values into the tens of thousands, and if a unique specimen appears with exceptional preservation and a spectacular mint error, experts believe the value could eventually approach the six-figure level. Under the right market conditions, that possibility is what keeps collectors addicted to searching through old pennies. And here's something emotional that older viewers especially understand. Coins like this traveled through everyday life during a completely different time in history. These pennies bought newspapers, coffee, groceries, and gasoline long before digital payments took over. Today, holding a 1993 cent feels like holding a small piece of the past. That nostalgia makes these coins even more collectible. So, if you own a 1993 Canadian 1 cent in fine condition, even one with dark or rusty-looking surfaces, don't dismiss it too quickly. Look closely at the lettering, date, and maple leaves. Check for unusual doubling, rotated designs, die cracks, or strange strike patterns. Because hidden inside that ordinary-looking penny could be a rare collector treasure worth far more than anyone imagines. And coming up next, we're moving into a Canadian cent that has stunned collectors with one of the most surprising value jumps of them all. Now, this is where the hunt becomes truly exciting. The 1997 Canadian 1 cent featuring Queen Elizabeth II has become one of the most fascinating modern Canadian pennies for collectors, especially when a possible double die error enters the picture. And if you've got one sitting in a jar or old collection right now, you may want to examine it very carefully, because certain doubled examples have shocked the collecting world with their value. At first glance, a 1997 penny looks ordinary. Millions were produced, and for years people spent them without a second thought. But hidden among those countless coins are a small number with unusual doubling, created during the die-making process at the Royal Canadian Mint. These are known as double die coins, and they can be dramatically more valuable than normal. Examples: your coin featuring Queen Elizabeth II already has strong collector appeal because error coins from the 1990s are becoming increasingly popular. On the front of the coin is the portrait of the Queen, designed by Dora D.P. Derry Hunt. The portrait shows a mature queen wearing a tiara, surrounded by the lettering Elizabeth to D.G. Regina, in fine condition. Most major design details remain visible, even though circulation wear has softened some of the higher points. On the reverse side is the classic Canadian maple leaf twig design, one of the most beloved penny designs in North American coin history. But this is exactly where collectors start looking closely for signs of doubling. A true double die coin happens when the die used to strike the coin receives multiple impressions that do not line up perfectly. This creates visible doubling on letters, numbers, or parts of the design. And unlike simple machine doubling, true double dies are highly collectible because the error is actually built into the die itself. Now, here's the part that gets collectors excited. On some 1997 Canadian cents, doubling can appear in the date, lettering, or parts of the maple leaf design. Under magnification, you may notice thickened numbers, shadow-like outlines, or doubled edges around the text. Many people overlook these details completely because they seem tiny at first glance. But experienced collectors know those small details can mean massive value differences, and the stronger the doubling appears, the more desirable the coin becomes. This is why collectors often inspect 1997 pennies with magnifying glasses and bright lighting. One small doubling feature could completely separate a common cent from a rare collectible worth thousands. Now, let's talk about the values. Because this is where things become truly unbelievable. An ordinary circulated 1997 Canadian penny may only be worth a few cents or dollars depending on condition. Fine condition examples with attractive surfaces can sell for modest premiums to collectors completing albums. Uncirculated red examples are worth much more because original copper color becomes harder to preserve every year, but once genuine double die features are confirmed, the prices can rise dramatically. Minor double die examples may sell for hundreds of dollars. Stronger visible doubling can push values into the thousands, especially if the coin is certified by a respected grading service. And rare high-grade double die specimens with exceptional eye appeal can become fierce auction battles among advanced collectors. Some rare Canadian double die cents from the modern era have reached astonishing prices, with elite examples pushing into the tens of thousands of dollars, depending on rarity and condition. And here's the shocking possibility that keeps collectors searching non-stop. If a unique or newly discovered 1997 double die variety appears with dramatic visible doubling and near-perfect preservation, experts believe the value could climb into six-figure territory under the right market conditions. That's how powerful rarity and collector demand can become. Just imagine finding a tiny penny in an old coffee tin. Then learning the doubled lettering on the coin could make it worth more than a luxury vehicle. That's the magic of coin collecting. And for older viewers especially, there's something nostalgic about these coins. Pennies like this passed through everyday life during the late 1990s, before digital payments changed how people handled money forever. Today, many collectors search these coins not only for profit, but for the connection to history and memory they represent. So, if you have a 1997 Canadian 1 cent with possible doubling, don't ignore it. Use magnification and inspect the date, lettering, and maple leaf details carefully. Look for shadow-like outlines, thick numbers, or repeated edges in the design, because one tiny minting error could transform an ordinary-looking penny into a rare collector treasure worth an incredible amount of money. And trust me, the next coin on this list becomes even more mysterious and even more valuable. Now, we're stepping into a completely different era of Canadian coin history with the 1945 Canada 1 cent featuring King George VI. And this is the kind of coin that instantly grabs the attention of serious collectors. Unlike many modern pennies, this coin carries the weight of World War II history, royal legacy, and incredible collector demand, all in one small piece of copper. And your coin being in extra fine condition makes it even more exciting. The year 1945 was one of the most important years in modern world history. World War II was finally coming to an end. Economies were changing, and millions of people across North America were rebuilding their lives after years of hardship. During that exact period, coins like this circulated through stores, military camps, train stations, and family businesses across Canada. That historical connection alone already makes the 1945 cent highly collectible. On the front of the coin is the portrait of King George VI, the father of Queen Elizabeth II. His portrait gives the coin a completely different appearance compared to later Canadian cents. Around the edge are the Latin words, Georgius vid, G, Rex et ind, imp, meaning, George VI, by the grace of God, King and Emperor of India. That inscription reminds collectors that this coin came from an entirely different chapter of history. Now, let's talk about condition. Because extra fine is where this coin starts becoming truly desirable. An extra fine 1945 Canadian cent still shows strong detail throughout the design. Much of the king's hair remains visible, the facial features stay sharp, and the lettering appears bold and clean. On the reverse side, the maple leaf twig design still carries impressive definition, with many leaf veins and fine details remaining visible despite light circulation, where that level of preservation is important. because many 1945 cents were heavily used during and after the war years. Coins passed through countless hands during a difficult economic period, meaning truly sharp. Surviving examples are much harder to find today. And here's where the story becomes even more exciting. Collectors aggressively search for 1945 Canadian cents because certain examples contain rare varieties and valuable minting errors. Some coins show doubled lettering, repunched dates, die cracks, or striking irregularities that can dramatically increase value. One tiny difference in the numbers or lettering can completely transform the worth of the coin. Experienced collectors often study 1945 cents under magnification, looking for sharp details, unusual strike patterns, or rare die varieties. Because when one of these hidden treasures appears, the prices can become astonishing. Now listen carefully to this. An ordinary, heavily worn 1945 Canadian penny may only be worth a few dollars, but an extra fine example like yours can already reach impressive values depending on color and eye appeal. Coins with original red or red-brown surfaces become even more desirable because preserving that rich copper color for over 80 years is extremely difficult, and circulated examples can explode in value. High-grade certified red specimens have sold for thousands of dollars at major auctions because so few survived in pristine condition. But then come the rare error coins and elite varieties. Certain 1945 Canadian cents with dramatic mint errors or rare die varieties have reached unbelievable prices among advanced collectors. Strong doubled dies, off-center strikes, or exceptional wartime varieties can push values into the tens of thousands of dollars. And if a nearly perfect specimen appears with a major error and extraordinary preservation, experts believe the value could rise into the high six-figure range under the right auction conditions. That's why collectors become obsessed with wartime Canadian pennies. These coins are more than money. They are historical artifacts connected to one of the most emotional periods of the 20th century. Every scratch, every worn edge, every detail carries a story from a generation that lived through global conflict and massive change. And for many older viewers watching today, coins like this bring back memories passed down through parents and grandparents who actually lived during that era. So if you own a 1945 Canada 1 cent in extra fine condition, treat it carefully. Examine the surfaces under strong light. Look for unusual double and punched numbers, die cracks, or strong original color hiding beneath the aging. Because that small copper coin could be far more than an old penny. It could be a rare piece of wartime history, worth an astonishing amount of money. And believe it or not, the next coin takes us even deeper into the world of rare Canadian cent treasures. Moving on to the 1968 Canadian 1 cent featuring Queen Elizabeth II. And this coin may look simple at first glance, but many collectors consider certain 1968 pennies some of the most underrated treasures in Canadian coin collecting. And when you find one in extra fine condition like yours, the excitement level rises immediately. Why? Because coins from the late 1960s mark a fascinating transition period in Canadian mint history. The Royal Canadian Mint was improving production methods, changing metal compositions, and striking massive numbers of coins for circulation. But during those busy production years, unusual varieties and minting mistakes quietly slipped into circulation. And today, collectors are hunting for them non-stop. Your 1968 cent carries the elegant portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, designed by Arnold Machen. This portrait became iconic during the 1960s and 1970 seconds because it captured a younger, yet more mature version of the Queen during an important period of her reign. Around the portrait are the words, Elizabeth II, DG Regina, giving the coin that classic royal appearance. Collectors instantly recognize. Now, here's where the condition becomes extremely important. An extra fine 1968 penny still retains sharp design details with only light where visible on the highest points. Much of the Queen's hair detail remains clear, the facial features stay strong, and the lettering remains crisp. On the reverse side, The maple leaf twig design still shows impressive definition, with visible veins and strong texture across the leaves. That level of preservation matters because most 1968 pennies saw heavy circulation for decades. Many became scratched, cleaned, corroded, or badly worn. Finding one that survived in attractive, extra fine condition already gives collectors something desirable. But now, the story becomes far more exciting. The 1968 Canadian cent is known among collectors for several interesting varieties and mint errors. Some coins show doubled lettering, die cracks, weak strikes, clipped planchets, or rotated dies. Others display unusual color variations caused by the bronze composition and aging process over time, and these small differences can create enormous value changes. Collectors carefully inspect the date, lettering, and maple leaf details because certain rare varieties are easy to miss without magnification. One tiny doubled number or subtle die flaw can instantly transform an ordinary-looking cent into a highly valuable collector coin. Now imagine this for a moment. A penny sitting forgotten in an old coffee can for decades suddenly gets examined under a magnifying glass, and the owner realizes the lettering is doubled or the strike is unusual. That tiny discovery could turn a 1-cent coin into a treasure worth thousands. That's exactly why coin collectors never stop searching old Canadian pennies, and the values can become absolutely shocking. Ordinary, circulated 1968 cents may only sell for small amounts, but extra fine examples with attractive surfaces and strong detail can already bring noticeable premiums from collectors building high-quality sets. Coins with original red or red-brown color become even more desirable because preserving bright copper surfaces for nearly 60 years is incredibly difficult. High-grade, uncirculated examples can reach hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on quality and rarity. But the true stars are the rare error coins. Dramatic 1968 Canadian cent errors with strong doubling, off-center strikes, or major die flaws have sold for astonishing amounts at auction. Some elite examples have pushed into the tens of thousands because advanced collectors compete aggressively for rare modern varieties, and experts believe that if a spectacular, undiscovered example appears with a major mint error and exceptional preservation, the value could eventually approach six-figure territory under the right collector demand. That possibility is what keeps collectors checking every penny they find, and there's also a nostalgic side to this coin that many older viewers understand deeply. The late 1960s were a completely different world. Coins like this passed through jukeboxes, diners, corner stores, and family cash registers during one of the most unforgettable decades in North American history. Today, holding a 1968 Canadian cent feels like holding a small piece of that era in your hand. So if you own a 1968 Canadian 1 cent in extra fine condition, don't underestimate it. Look closely at the date, lettering, maple leaves, and overall strike quality. Watch for unusual doubling, die cracks, rotated designs, or remaining original luster, because hidden inside that small copper coin could be a rare collector treasure worth far more than anyone ever expected. And coming up next, we reach one of the most surprising Canadian penny discoveries of them all. Understand, the 1945 George VI Canada 1 cent coin may look like an ordinary old penny at first glance, but collectors know that certain examples of this wartime coin can be worth an unbelievable amount of money today. And if your coin is sitting in extra fine condition, you could already be holding something far more valuable than you think. Take a close look at the front of the coin. You'll see King George VI facing left, with sharp lettering around the rim reading George's VIDG, Rex ET Ind, Imp. On extra fine examples, the king's hair details should still be strong and visible, especially around the ear and crown area. The cheek and jawline should still show clear definition with only light wear. That is exactly what collectors want to see, because condition changes everything when it comes to value. Now flip the coin over, and you'll notice the famous maple leaf twig design that Canadian collectors instantly recognize. On extra fine coins, the veins inside the maple leaves are usually still visible, and the center details remain sharp without heavy flattening. Many old Canadian pennies were heavily used during the 1940s, especially during World War II. So finding one with strong details today is becoming much harder every year. What makes the 1945 Canada cent so fascinating is the time period behind it. This coin was produced right as World War II was ending. Canada's economy was changing rapidly, metal demand was high, and millions of coins were circulated heavily across the country. Because of this, surviving high-grade examples became much scarcer than most people realize. Many collectors ignore them at first, until they discover how valuable the best examples can become. But here's where things start getting exciting. Certain 1945 cents show striking errors and rare varieties that can completely explode the value. Some examples have noticeable die cracks running through the lettering. Others show double details in the date or legends. A few rare specimens even display dramatic off-center strikes or repunched numbers that advanced collectors fight over at auctions. If you spot any unusual marks, doubling, or strange alignment, you may want that coin checked immediately, because rare error versions can bring astonishing prices. And now comes the shocking part. A normal circulated 1945 George VI Canada cent may only sell for a few dollars. But once you move into extra fine condition, values can jump dramatically depending on color, surface quality, and overall eye appeal. Strong, extra fine brown examples can sell for hundreds. Red-brown pieces often move into the thousands. And fully red, high-grade examples with exceptional surfaces have stunned collectors, with auction prices reaching tens of thousands of dollars. But the true headline makers are the ultra-rare error coins. Some elite specimens with major mint errors and near-perfect preservation have reportedly crossed into six-figure territory among serious collectors. Imagine finding a tiny 1-cent coin worth more than a luxury house, simply because most people failed to notice the rare details hidden inside it. This is why experienced collectors always inspect old Canadian pennies carefully under bright light. Tiny details make all the difference. Look closely at the date. Examine the lettering around the rim. Check for unusual doubling, cracks, weak strikes, or strange spacing. Even the color matters. Coins with original red surfaces are especially desirable because copper naturally darkens over time. A bright red 1945 cent, surviving after more than 80 years, is incredibly difficult to find. And here's something many people never realize. Cleaning the coin can destroy its value instantly. Even a beautiful, extra-fine example can lose thousands of dollars if harshly cleaned or polished. Collectors want original surfaces, natural aging, and authentic texture. So if you think you may have a valuable 1945 Canada cent, never scrub it or attempt to shine it up. Stories continue to surface of people discovering rare Canadian cents hidden inside inherited collections, forgotten coffee cans, and old family coin books. Some were nearly spent at face value before sharp-eyed collectors recognized the rarity sitting right in front of them. That's what makes coin collecting so exciting. Treasure can appear when you least expect it. So if you own a 1945 George VI Canada 1-cent coin in extra fine condition, don't underestimate it. What looks like a simple old penny could actually be a surviving piece of wartime history with enormous collector demand behind it. And if your coin carries one of those rare errors or unusually sharp red surfaces, the value could become absolutely unbelievable. Now, here's a coin that surprises many collectors, because at first glance, it doesn't look rare at all. The 1991 Queen Elizabeth II Canada 1-cent coin is one of those pennies that millions of people handled without a second thought. But today, certain examples with unusual color changes, rare surfaces, and strong condition details are creating serious attention among collectors across North America. The moment you hold a 1991 Canadian cent, the first thing you notice is the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II on the front. This design shows a mature portrait of the Queen facing right. surrounded by the lettering Elizabeth to D.G. Regina, even in fine condition. The portrait details should still remain visible, although there will be moderate wear across the hair and facial features. The lettering may appear softer, but it should still be readable without difficulty. Now, let's talk about the part that instantly grabs attention: the color change. Many 1991 Canadian cents were originally bright copper-colored when they left the Royal Canadian Mint, but over time, exposure to moisture, air, oils from human hands, and environmental conditions caused some coins to darken dramatically. Some turned deep brown, others developed orange, purple, blue, or even rainbow-like toning that gives the coin a completely different appearance. And this is where things become very interesting for collectors. Natural color toning can actually increase desirability when it creates attractive patterns or unusual shades. Some collectors specifically search for coins with unique rainbow toning, because no two-tone coins ever look exactly the same. A naturally toned 1991 cent with eye-catching colors can sell for far more than an ordinary example, but collectors must be careful because not every color-changed coin is valuable. Artificial heat damage, chemical exposure, or environmental corrosion can also change a coin's appearance. If the surface looks rough, spotted, bubbly, or unnatural, the value may actually drop. However, if the color change appears smooth, vibrant, and natural under light, it could attract serious collector interest. Now flip the coin over and you'll see Canada's famous maple leaf twig design. Even in fine condition, the overall design should still be visible, although the leaf veins may show wear. On better preserved examples, the maple leaves remain sharper and more detailed. Collectors especially love coins that still have strong original shine hiding beneath the toned surfaces. But here's the shocking part most people never realize. Certain 1991 Canada cents are being examined closely for striking errors and rare varieties. Some show off-center strikes. Others have die cracks cutting through the lettering or date. A few rare pieces display doubling in the inscriptions or unusual plating flaws that create dramatic visual effects. If your coin has strange texture, unusual doubling, or odd coloring around the letters and numbers, it may deserve closer inspection. And because Canada officially stopped producing pennies years ago, collector demand for older 1-cent coins continues to grow steadily. More people are searching through old jars and collections, hoping to uncover hidden treasures before they disappear forever. That demand has pushed prices higher for unusual and visually striking examples. A normal circulated 1991 Canada cent in fine condition might only be worth a small amount over face value. But attractive, naturally toned examples with unique colors can sell for much more depending on eye appeal. Rare mint errors and exceptional specimens have shocked collectors with values reaching hundreds, thousands, and in elite cases even higher at specialty auctions where competition becomes intense. Imagine discovering that a strange-looking penny sitting forgotten in a drawer for decades is suddenly wanted by collectors simply because of its unusual appearance and rarity. That's exactly why experienced coin hunters never ignore color changes on old copper coins. The key is learning how to identify the difference between natural aging and damage. Natural toning usually appears smooth and blended into the metal, while damage often looks uneven, harsh, or chemically altered. Lighting also matters. Under bright light, valuable toned coins can reveal stunning hidden colors that completely transform their appearance. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is cleaning the coin. The moment a toned coin is polished or scrubbed, its originality disappears forever. Collectors want authentic surfaces with natural aging because that originality tells the story of the coin's journey through history. So if you own a 1991 Queen Elizabeth to Canada 1-cent coin with unusual color changes, don't rush to spend it or throw it aside. Take a closer look. Study the surfaces carefully. Examine the date, lettering, and overall color patterns, because hidden inside what looks like an ordinary penny could be a collectible piece that surprises you with far more value than anyone expected. Now, here's a coin that many people would normally ignore without a second glance. The 1975 Queen Elizabeth II Canada 1-cent coin is often found sitting in jars, old boxes, and forgotten collections covered with dark spots, discoloration, or what people call rust. But what shocks many collectors is that some of these strange-looking pennies can still attract serious attention depending on the condition, surface texture, and rare mint characteristics hiding underneath the damage. The first thing you notice on a 1975 Canadian cent is the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II on the front of the coin. This younger portrait of the Queen faces right, surrounded by the words, Elizabeth to DG Regina. On a coin in fine condition, the main portrait details should still remain visible even with moderate wear. The hairlines may appear softer, and some of the finer facial details could be faded from years of circulation, but the overall design should still be clear enough to recognize immediately. Now, let's talk about the rusty appearance, because this is where many people become confused. Canadian 1-cent coins from this era were made primarily from copper, and copper does not rust the same way iron does. What people usually call rust is actually oxidation, corrosion, environmental staining, or heavy toning caused by moisture and age. Some coins develop deep brown surfaces, others turn nearly black. A few even show green or reddish patches that make the coin look damaged or unusual, and surprisingly, not every dark or spotted coin is worthless. Some naturally aged coins still hold collector interest, especially if the details remain strong underneath the surface changes. In fact, certain collectors specifically search for dramatic toning patterns or unusual aged appearances because they make the coin visually unique. A naturally toned 1975 cent with strong detail can sometimes sell for more than an ordinary bright example, but here's where things get really interesting. Some 1975 Canadian cents contain rare mint errors that collectors aggressively search for today. Certain examples show off-center strikes where part of the design is missing. Others reveal die cracks running through the lettering or date. Some display weak strikes, clipped planchets, or doubled features that dramatically increase collector value. If your coin has unusual marks that look different from normal wear or corrosion, it may actually be hiding a rare mint mistake. Now flip the coin over and you'll see the famous maple leaf twig design. Even on fine condition examples, the basic leaf structure should still be visible, although the finer veins may be worn smooth from circulation. Collectors closely inspect this area because certain strike errors become easier to spot on the reverse side of the coin. What makes the 1975 Canada cent especially fascinating is that millions were heavily circulated during a time when people rarely saved pennies carefully. Most were spent daily, tossed into drawers, or exposed to years of moisture and handling. Because of this, finding high-quality survivors today has become much harder than many people expect. And here comes the shocking part. A normal worn 1975 Canadian cent may only be worth a few cents to most people. But rare error versions, exceptional preserved examples, or coins with unusual mint characteristics have stunned collectors with values reaching hundreds or even thousands of dollars at auctions. Some elite mint error examples with dramatic flaws have sold for unbelievable prices, simply because they are so difficult to find. Imagine pulling an old dark penny from a rusty tin box and discovering it contains a rare mint error that collectors have been searching for over decades. That's exactly why experienced coin hunters examine every old Canadian cent carefully before dismissing it. One important thing to remember is this: never clean the coin. Many people try to scrub away the dark surfaces, hoping to make the penny look shiny again, but cleaning can destroy collector value instantly. Collectors prefer original surfaces, even if the coin looks old or heavily toned. Once cleaned, the natural history and texture disappear forever. The best way to inspect your 1975 Canada cent is under bright light or with a magnifying glass. Look carefully at the date, lettering, and maple leaves. Watch for doubling, unusual lines, strange colors, or areas where the design looks misaligned. Tiny differences can completely change the value of the coin, and with Canadian pennies no longer being produced, More collectors continue searching through old collections, hoping to uncover overlooked treasures before they vanish forever. That growing demand has turned even ordinary-looking 1-cent coins into exciting discoveries for sharp-eyed collectors. So, if you have a 1975 Queen Elizabeth II Canada 1-cent coin in fine condition with dark surfaces or a rusty appearance, don't assume it has no value. Hidden beneath that aged look could be a rare collectible with a story that stretches back nearly 50 years, and possibly a value that could completely shock you. Now, this is where things start getting truly exciting for collectors. The 1968 Queen Elizabeth II Canada 1-cent coin may look simple at first glance, but certain extra fine examples have become highly desirable because of their age, condition, and the hidden details many people completely overlook. And if your coin still has sharp details after more than half a century, you could be holding a surprisingly valuable piece of Canadian history. The moment you examine the front of the coin, you'll see the young portrait of Queen Elizabeth II facing right. Around the edge are the words, Elizabeth to DG Regina. On an extra fine example, the Queen's hairlines remain very clear, especially above the forehead and around the back of the head. The facial features still show noticeable sharpness, with only light wear visible on the highest points. That level of preservation is exactly what collectors search for, because most 1968 cents were heavily circulated for decades. Now, turn the coin over and you'll find the famous maple leaf twig design. That has become one of Canada's most recognizable coin images. On extra fine coins, the maple leaves still show strong veins and crisp outlines. The center details remain bold without heavy flattening, and traces of original mint luster may still flash under bright light. When a coin from 1968 still carries that kind of detail today, collectors immediately take notice. But what makes the 1968 Canada cent especially interesting is the period in which it was made. During the late 1960s, Canada was going through major economic and cultural changes, and millions of coins moved rapidly through circulation every day. Most people never imagined these pennies would someday become collectible treasures. Many were lost, damaged, cleaned, or worn nearly smooth over time. That's why extra fine survivors are becoming harder to locate every single year. And here's where the story becomes even more fascinating. Certain 1968 Canadian cents contain rare mint varieties and errors that can dramatically increase value. Some examples show doubling in the date or lettering. Others display die cracks running across the surface or unusual strike weaknesses caused during production at the Royal Canadian Mint. A few rare pieces even reveal off-center strikes or planchet defects that make them extremely attractive to serious collectors. This is why experienced collectors always inspect old pennies carefully under magnification. One tiny detail can completely transform an ordinary-looking coin into a high-value rarity. A small doubled number in the date, an unusual crack through the design, or an odd strike pattern could mean the difference between a common coin and one worth thousands. Now here comes the part that shocks many people. A normal circulated 1968 Canada 1-cent coin may only be worth a small premium over face value, but extra fine examples with strong red or red-brown surfaces can command far higher prices. Coins with exceptional eye appeal, original mint color, and sharp details have sold for hundreds and even thousands of dollars. And when major mint errors are involved, the values can rise dramatically at auction. Some rare high-grade specimens with stunning original red color have created intense bidding wars among collectors because copper coins naturally darken over time. Finding a bright red 1968 cent after more than 50 years is incredibly difficult. That rarity alone can make certain coins extremely valuable. Imagine discovering that an old penny sitting quietly inside a forgotten collection is suddenly worth far more than anyone expected, simply because it survived in extraordinary condition. That's the thrill that keeps coin collectors searching through jars, albums, and old family collections every single day. One mistake many people make is trying to clean old coins before selling them. That can instantly destroy collector value. Even extra fine coins lose much of their appeal once the original surfaces are damaged. Collectors want natural aging, authentic color, and untouched surfaces. Because originality matters more than artificial shine, the best way to examine your 1968 Canada cent is under bright lighting with a magnifying glass. Look closely at the date, lettering, and maple leaves. Watch for doubling, strange marks, die cracks, or unusual coloring. Pay attention to the remaining mint luster and overall sharpness of the design because condition plays a massive role in determining value. And because Canada officially stopped producing pennies years ago, collector demand continues to grow steadily. More people are now hunting older Canadian cents, hoping to uncover hidden treasures before they disappear completely from circulation and private collections. So if you own a 1968 Queen Elizabeth II, Canada 1 cent coin in extra fine condition, don't underestimate it. What seems like an ordinary old penny could actually be a beautifully preserved collectible with serious demand among coin enthusiasts. And if your coin carries one of those rare mint errors or exceptional original surfaces, the value might be far more shocking than you ever imagined. Now, here's a coin that many collectors quietly search for because it comes from an important period in Canadian coin history. The 1962 Queen Elizabeth II Canada 1 cent coin may seem ordinary at first glance, but certain fine condition examples have surprised collectors with strong values, especially when rare varieties, unusual surfaces, or hidden mint errors are discovered. And after more than 60 years, finding one with solid detail still remaining is becoming harder than most people realize. The first thing you notice on the front of the 1962 Canadian cent is the young portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, facing right. Around the edge are the words, Elizabeth to DG Regina. On a fine condition coin, the portrait will show noticeable wear from circulation, but many important details should still remain visible. Parts of the hair may appear smoother, and the highest points of the face may show flattening, but the overall image of the Queen should still stand out clearly. Collectors pay close attention to these details because condition has a huge effect on value. Now flip the coin over and you'll see Canada's classic maple leaf twig design. Even in fine condition, the leaves should still be recognizable with some inner detail visible. The lettering and date should remain strong enough to read easily without heavy fading. Coins from the early 1960s often circulated heavily for decades. So many surviving examples today are worn almost completely smooth. That's why collectors still appreciate coins with stronger detail remaining. But what truly makes the 1962 Canada cent exciting is the possibility of hidden mint varieties and rare production errors. Some examples show doubled lettering or slight doubling in the date. Others reveal die cracks stretching across the design or unusual strike weaknesses caused during production. There are also reports of off-center strikes and planchet flaws that create unusual appearances. Collectors love to hunt for. This is exactly why experienced coin collectors inspect every old penny carefully, instead of ignoring it. One small difference can completely change the value of the coin. Something as tiny as a doubled number, an unusual line through the lettering, or a strange strike pattern can turn a common-looking cent into a highly collectible rarity. And here comes the part that surprises many people. Most ordinary 1962 Canada cents in worn condition are worth only a small amount over face value. But fine condition examples with attractive surfaces, original color, and rare errors can become far more valuable. Red-brown pieces with sharp remaining detail often sell for impressive prices. While rare, fully red examples are especially difficult to find today, collectors become even more excited when the coin still shows traces of original mint luster beneath the aging copper surface. Copper naturally darkens over time, so any 1962 penny that still carries flashes of red color after more than 6 decades immediately attracts attention. Some rare error specimens from this year have sold for hundreds and even thousands of dollars at auction, especially when the mistake is dramatic and easy to see. Imagine finding out that a tiny old penny, sitting forgotten in a drawer for years, actually contains a rare mint error collectors are desperately searching for. That's what makes coin collecting so addictive for many people. The history behind the coin also adds to its appeal. In 1962, Canada was experiencing rapid growth and modernization. These pennies passed through the hands of millions of people during everyday life, from grocery stores to bus stations to family businesses. Every mark and every scratch tells part of that journey through history. One very important thing collectors always remember is never clean the coin. Many people believe shining an old penny will increase its value, but the opposite is usually true. Cleaning damages the original surfaces and removes the natural aging collectors want to see. Even a fine condition coin can lose significant value if it has been harshly polished or scrubbed. The best way to check your 1962 Canada cent is under bright lighting with a magnifying glass. Look closely at the date, lettering, and maple leaves. Watch for doubling, unusual marks, die cracks, or strange coloring. Pay attention to how much detail remains in the queen's hair and the leaf veins, because those details help determine the grade and collector value. And now that Canada no longer produces pennies, interest in older 1-cent coins continues growing every year. More collectors are searching through old jars, inherited collections, and forgotten albums, hoping to uncover hidden treasures before they disappear forever. So if you own a 1962 Queen Elizabeth II Canada 1-cent coin in fine condition, don't dismiss it too quickly. What appears to be a simple old penny could actually hold surprising collector demand and hidden value. And if your coin contains one of those rare mint varieties or unusual production errors, the final price could be far more shocking than you ever expected.